Genesis 1, 9 to 13. And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good. And God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb yielding seed, and the fruit tree yielding fruit after his kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. The earth brought forth grass and herb yielding seed after his kind, and the tree yielding fruit whose seed was in itself after his kind. And God saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning were the third day. Matthew Henry's commentary. The third day's work is related in these verses, the forming of the sea and the dry land and the making of the earth fruitful. Hitherto, the power of the Creator had been exerted and employed about the upper part of the visible world. The light of heaven was kindled and the firmament of heaven fixed. But now he descends to this lower world, the earth, which was designed for the children of men, designed both for their habitation and for their maintenance. And here we have an account of the fitting of it for both, the building of their house and the spreading of their table. Observe, Roman numeral 1, how the earth was prepared to be a habitation for man by the gathering of the waters together and the making of the dry land to appear. Thus, instead of the confusion which there was, verse 2, when earth and water were mixed in one great mass, behold, now there is order, by such a separation as rendered them both useful. God said, let it be so, and it was so. No sooner said than done. 1. The waters which had covered the earth were ordered to retire and to gather into one place, namely, those hollows which were fitted and appointed for their reception and rest. The waters thus cleared, thus collected, and thus lodged in their proper place, he called seas. Though they are many in distant regions and washing several shores, yet, either above ground or underground, they have communication with each other, and so they are one. And the common receptacle of waters into which all the rivers flow, Ecclesiastes 1:7. Waters and seas often in Scripture signify troubles and afflictions, Psalm 42:7, 69:2, 14, and 15. God's own people are not exempted from these in this world. But it is their comfort that they are only waters under the heaven, there are none in heaven, and that they are all in the place that God has appointed them and within the bounds that he has set for them. How the waters were gathered together at first, and how they are still bound and limited by the same almighty hand that first confined them, are elegantly described in Psalm 104, verses 6 through 9, and are there mentioned as matter of praise. Those that go down to the sea in ships ought to acknowledge daily the wisdom, power, and goodness of the Creator in making the great waters serviceable to man for trade and commerce. And those that tarry at home must own themselves indebted to him that keeps the sea with bars and doors in its decreed place and stays its proud waves. Job 38:10 and 11. 2. The dry land was made to appear and emerge out of the waters and was called earth and given to the children of men. The earth, it seems, was in being before, but it was of no use because it was under water. Thus, many of God's gifts are received in vain because they are buried. Make them to appear and they become serviceable. We who to this day enjoy the benefit of the dry land, though since this it was once deluged and dried again, must own ourselves tenants to and dependents upon that God whose hands formed the dry land. Psalm 95:5, Jonah 1:9, Roman numeral 2. How the earth was furnished for the maintenance and support of man, verses 11 and 12. Present provision was now made by the immediate products of the newly formed earth, which, in obedience to God's command, was no sooner made than it became fruitful, and brought forth grass for the cattle and herb for the service of man. Provision was likewise made for time to come by the perpetuating of the several kinds of vegetables, which are numerous, various, and all curious, and every one having its seed in itself after its kind, that, during the continuance of man upon the earth, food might be fetched out of the earth for his use and benefit. Lord, what is man that he is thus visited and regarded, that such care should be taken and such provision made for the support and preservation of those guilty and obnoxious lives which have been 1,000 times forfeited? Observe here, 1, that not only the earth is the Lord's, but the fullness thereof, and he is the rightful owner and sovereign disposer not only of it, but of all its furniture. The earth was emptiness, verse 2, but now by a word's speaking it has become full of God's riches, and his they are still, his corn and his wine, his wool and his flax. Hosea 2:9. Though the use of them is allowed to us, the property still remains in him, and to his service and honor they must be used. 2. That common providence is a continued creation, and in it our Father works hitherto. The earth still remains under the efficacy of this command to bring forth grass and herbs and its annual products, and though, being according to the common course of nature, these are not standing miracles, yet they are standing instances of the unwearied power and unexhausted goodness of the world's great maker and master. 3. That though God ordinarily makes use of the agency of second causes according to their nature, yet he neither needs them nor is tied to them. For though the precious fruits of the earth are usually brought forth by the influences of the sun and moon, Deuteronomy 33:14, yet here we find the earth bearing a great abundance of fruit, probably ripe fruit, before the sun and moon were made. 4. That it is good to provide things necessary before we have occasion to use them. Before the beasts and man were made, here were grass and herbs prepared for them. God thus dealt wisely and graciously with man. Let not man then be foolish and unwise for himself. 5. That God must have the glory of all the benefit we receive from the products of the earth, either for food or physic. It is he that hears the heavens when they hear the earth, Hosea 2:21-22. And if we have, through grace, an interest in him who is the fountain, when the streams are dried up and the fig tree does not blossom, we may rejoice in him. My translation. Then God said, may the waters under the heavens be collected to one place so that dry land appears. So it was. God called the dry land earth, and the gathered waters he called seas. God saw that it was good. Then God said, may the earth sprout forth grass, fruitful vegetation, trees bearing fruit, fruit having its seed in itself according to its kind on the earth. So it was. The earth sprouted forth grass, fruitful vegetation according to its kind, and trees bearing fruit, the fruit of which has its seed in itself according to its kind. God saw that it was good. So there was evening and morning, the third day. My comments. Notice that the chorus, God saw that it was good, does not happen on the second day, but is delayed until the middle of the third day. This indicates that the third day continues the work of the second day. And the purpose of the expanse, then, in separating the waters above from the waters below, was to allow another separation to happen between land and sea. Land and sea could not be separated until the upper waters were separated from the lower waters, thus creating an atmosphere. The idea of dry land appearing has a rich, progressive idea in Scripture. It points us to another time when dry land began to appear, which is after the flood, when the waters began to abate. Dry land eventually appeared such that when Noah sent out the dove, eventually the dove did not come back. There is always favor or grace from God when dry land appears. When the Israelites go through the Red Sea and God parts the waters so that the Israelites could go through on dry land, God was giving grace to the Israelites. When the Israelites went through the Jordan River into the Promised Land, a sort of baptism which Jesus culminates in his own baptism, then Jesus was raised from the dead. He went through the heavens, as the writer of Hebrews says, and Jesus prepared a place for the church in which to dwell. That is our ultimate dry ground. Instead of drowning in an ocean of sin and misery, Jesus gave us the opportunity to be heirs of the kingdom of life. The word vegetation is a rich word. It has implications of fresh rain-kissed verdure, greenery. Verdure means lush green plants. God provided a rich carpet of green to cover the land that had just appeared. That, by the way, is how the two creative acts of the third day are related. The land appears, and then it is adorned. Also true in this passage is that Moses is here yet again fighting against ancient Near Eastern religions. Those religions thought that fertility of the land was in the hands of various gods, and they would make great sacrifices to ensure fertility. This way of thinking was to become a great snare to Israel later on. Baal worship was enticing for several reasons. First, it would seem to ensure a good harvest. And secondly, Baal worship for the fertility of the soil often involved cult prostitution. It was thought that fertility in sexual intercourse was connected to fertility for the soil. And if Baal had relations with his consort Asherah, that act was thought to result in fertility for the soil. And so when humans had sexual intercourse, that was thought to encourage Baal to have intercourse with Asherah so that in turn the soil would be blessed. And you could see, from the point of view of the flesh at least, why this religion would be appealing to the Israelites. That's why Moses takes such great care to state so clearly that only God gives fertility to the earth, and he does so at his own instigation, not by being persuaded to do so by human beings.